Oh, hi, this is my video request by C55365 or CJ55365 about the YouTube video or podcast Prophets of Munster by Dan Carlin. So, in Munster in like 1536, there was a rebellion in Munster. I'm like super high. What happened was I was wearing these pants, and I don't like think I've been worn these pants and for a while or whatever, and like I reached my hand in here, and there was $16. And my mom's like, "Don't buy that on anything." And I didn't listen to her. I went and got weed. I got the good stuff. It's like $13 for 1 gram. And then I went to the store and I got a Monster because they have them like for $2.75. And I was gonna smoke weed and like watch videos and then like get high and drink this. But so anyways, if I get sidetracked, it's because of that. But I'm high on my energy drink. So anyway, so Dan Carlin's talking about like the Reformation and the time leading up to it, and he's talking about like how maybe it was a bad idea to get really baked before I do this video. If the video doesn't go well, I'll turn it off and I'll just do it later when I'm sober. But I just really want to do the video, and I remembered because I've been busy working on this, my timeline template. But yeah, the way that Dan Carlin does his videos is he's very kind of tries to put you into the world, you know, like it's I don't know, stony way to do it. Like isn't that wild? And oops. Accidentally put my glasses on the remote control. Turn the TV on. Oh no, now the TV turned itself on. My God. Jesus, will you turn off? Okay. So, in the world leading up to the Reformation, there is so much to talk about with this. This is the most interesting freaking thing. So yes, very good request video. And in fact, you said that you gave me the request video before because I saw this video before. I've seen it, this exact podcast. It was like 4 hours and 12 minutes. And yeah, him telling the whole story. And to listen to a big, long story like that the second time, I mean, yeah, definitely. It was just as or more valuable to me the second time. Because now I feel like I remember it. I wouldn't have been able to retell the story from the first time I heard it. But yeah, basically, to put it really shortly, quickly, Munster became the center of the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists were the one of the new Protestant religious communities that were popping up in Germany because of the Reformation. 1536 was the year of the rebellion. 1534 was when Anne Boleyn had her head chopped off, the wife of King Henry VIII, because he wanted to divorce her. He accused her of infidelity. He wanted to be able to have the permission to divorce her, but the Catholic Church didn't allow it, so he ordered it, or he just broke away and started. So like it was everybody was doing that, and so the first was in Germany was Martin Luther, and what Dan Carlin said was that Martin Luther was the first guy who complained about the Catholic Church, who got away with it, because every other time they would bring the person back to Italy and then like burn them at the stake. That was the common way to kill people, heretics, in those days. He said that in America it wasn't done that much, only in Salem. And so yeah, so he got away with it. They protected him, so they broke away. And then there were other groups, and then the Anabaptists were some of the. They were like the Quakers. They were very like austere, and the women dressed up really, I guess, modestly, and they went to Munster, and then they got more. The ones there decided they were all going to become communists, so it invited a bunch of poor people to come and live off of the commune, and so then there were more Anabaptists, and then the Anabaptists, there got so many of them that they took over the town. So the first guy was Jan Hus, and he was a Dutch dude who he was like. So Jan Carlin said he was 20 years older than his wife, but he was 36 when he died. So does that make her 14 or something? But he decided that he was speaking directly to God. I need to read the book. He said that there was a book written that you can read. Man, if I was that would be a good book to have on my website. But yeah, there was a guy who, when he was 13 years old, he witnessed that, and he wrote about it when he was an older guy, and I guess that's the only first-hand source and the best source. And that's a lot of what Dan Carlin said. That's a lot of detail for a 13-year-old. But yeah, so what happened was they took over, and Jan Hus was talking directly to God, and he started having sex with other women, women, and giving and like assassinating people who complained. The first person they killed was the town blacksmith. The town only had 10 to 12,000 people. Today it has over 300,000, like 330,000 people. But in those days, the whole thing was surrounded by a wall that they removed afterwards so that it wouldn't happen again. But they killed the blacksmith for complaining. Jan Hus axed him between the shoulder blades and then shot him in the head, and he died eight days later in somebody's house. And then they took over and they just started killing people who would not go along with it. So people ran away and they took over. But then they had the prince, and that was the capital of the Principate. So I guess the prince, I was picturing him living in the castle outside the walls or something. But Jan Hus, he went out with 10 guys, because he said that he was going to be able to defeat the 200-man army by himself because God was with him. And so everybody, right outside the walls, everybody saw him get stabbed in the stomach, and then have his guts spilled out as he pulled the spear out, and then pulled off his horse, and then they hacked his limbs and legs and head off, and killed everybody. And everybody ran and freaked out. People think that what happened was there was a ergot infection. Ergot is a mold that grows on rice, or not rice, like grain, when uh, it gets like wet, and like damp, and so, and then I guess that was a common occurrence. I went to look it up. I forgot to, but that would happen from time to time, and it would make everybody lose their mind and like cause problems. And yeah, but yeah, this time, yeah, they think maybe it was because of that. But after he, a few days later, another guy named John of Danken, John of Gragen, another Dutch guy, who was one of the people, I guess, who, no, he moved there when he was 10, when he was 9. But so he was, and he died. He was killed when the whole thing was over, like after a few months. I think the thing was like 6 months long, but he was only 27 when he died. So he's like 26, 27. And he took over and said that, and he was, I guess he was different. If you see the drawings, the first dude was like, had a big beard, and he dressed all in black, and his wife dressed all in white. And then the second guy was like more of a ladies' man, and not as like crazy looking. Dan Carlin said it was like Matthew McConaughey was the new guy, and the old guy was Christopher Walken. But yeah, he started doing the same thing, saying that now God was talking to him, and everybody believed him. And so then he decided that everybody needed to be polygamous, not just like that was part of the communism. And so he got to have sex with whoever he wanted. Yeah, and then eventually, and 2 times the prince sent armies in, and the first time and the first 2 times they were sent in, 200 of the prince's soldier died, and only 10 of the defenders died, because the first time the contingent was just drunk, and they when they woke up, they thought it was dawn when it was really dusk, and so they went running into the walls to climb over the walls and take the city and kill everybody and get their plunder. And so when all of the other guys in the army saw it, they instead of stopping them, they just joined them, because they didn't want to get like left out and not get their women to rape and stuff to steal. And so, but it didn't work out for them, because then it got dark, and then as they were climbing up the ladders, everybody from the city was like fervently, faithful, and fought like God was on their side. And I guess women and everybody were hacking off their hands. So they're trying to get over the ladders and throwing big logs down to knock all the guys who were on the ladder off, like 4 guys at a time. And getting like hot oil poured in their eyes, and so they all ran, and yeah, it was like 200 died, and only 10 of the defenders died, and then he organized another one, and it happened again, and so then the third time they came, they encircled the entire city with a wall that was wide enough to drive a 12-horse or 14-horse carriage, and like with towers and gates, and to starve them out so they wouldn't have to fight them anymore. And so they started to starve until there were like piles of people in the streets, just wailing and rolling around. And like the guy, John, said that John of Leyden, that was his name, John of Leyden. Dan Carlin was calling him John Leyden. But he told everybody that God told him that he would turn the cobble as soon as they got hungry. That God would turn the cobblestones of the city into bread. So people were like trying to bite at the bread right as they were dying in hopes, and then before realizing it was just a lie, and then dying, and like and cursing, and but you could, and then somebody said that you could hear wailings from every single part of the city. Of people dying, and but like the leadership was still eating fine. So he so some people just started to be able to escape, and but one lady before it happened, a 15-year-old girl had an because one thing that they would do is they'd all have dinner food together in the common hall. And so the leader and everybody would read the Bible. And so one of the Bible stories was that Solomon had 700 wives. And that's what. But then one of the stories, I guess a girl went in to kill the king because she gave him a poisonous shirt. And so she goes, "Hey, let me give him a poisonous shirt. I'll pretend to be a defector, and I'll give him the poisonous shirt, and then because the prince dies, all of the army will go away." So they let her go. I guess they tied her up and somewhere where they could find her, and and she said she was like an escaped like a rebel or something, and and so that she was going to do it, but somebody else had overheard their plan and escaped first and told the prince that there was a little girl who was going to come and pretend to be a defectee and try to give him a poisonous shirt. So yeah, when they got her, they put her on the breaking rack, which is that thing where they stretch you out and then they break all of the bones in your body, so that you take the longest to die. And you can still see those in museums. I don't know if I ever saw one. I went to the castle, Carlisle Castle in Scotland. I don't know if that one had it, but but then they came and they invaded. They starved him out, and so there was a bunch of like a group of them, like 50 or 100 of them. I think it was maybe just women and children who were starving, begged to just get left to be released because maybe they could just, the prince would feed them if they renounced their faith. But the prince wouldn't take them, so they were in the no man's zone, just starving, trying to eat grass and rolling around and dying, and until the women in the besieging army felt bad for them and snuck them food at night. And I think they were rescued, but anyway, they were eventually stormed, and by the time they stormed, they couldn't really fight back. They were too weak, but they were able to fight. One group of 50 or 100 of them were able to fight in the central square for an hour, and one of the leaders, I think it was John of Leyden, hid in a woman's attic, but she gave him up for food. And they took him, and there were like 3 leaders, and they tied them back to back on a pole with a chain with spikes going into their necks, and so they were all together, so they could all feel each other. And then they would go to one of them, and they got a red hot forceps, and they started with their underarm by tearing the flesh off, and then they started tearing like their muscles off and their tendons off, and he had to be tortured for an hour. So whenever they, like, if they passed out, they would wait and they'd try to revive them, and then they'd restart the timer because they had to be awake for all of it. And so yeah, they tore the dude apart physically, and then they stuck a spear into his heart. Yeah, and then they did the next guy who was like right next to him around the pole, and then John of Leyden was last. Yeah, I guess they made it. They figured it would be most torturous if you got to experience your friends dying, because then he knew that was about to happen to him. But then when they did it to him, he hardly let out a sound. Yeah, and then they tore the walls down of the city, and to this day, Germany has like laws against religions. Like Scientology is outlawed in Germany, and yeah, Martin Luther was like a hero for the Nazis because he wanted to get rid of the Jews. But when the Anabaptists sought the help of Martin Luther, he didn't want to have anything to do with them. But Dan Carlin thought that maybe that was because he was just doing what his protector was telling him to say, you know. But and like this is in the beginning of the rebellion. But so yeah, and then they and that was in, yeah, so 1536. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, have a little bit energy drink. Dan Carlin was saying that the world was in so much change in that time that the people probably were totally aware of it also. And one important thing that was going also was kind of like the disruption of the classes. And I guess that maybe that was, yeah, a contributing factor to the rebellion against the Catholic Church. They were rebelling against the Catholic Church because it was charging money for the entrances into heaven to build St. Peter's Cathedral. So maybe we can talk about that later. But yeah, the people were going through so much change that they knew that they were going through the change, and because of the disruption of the classes, like they started to overlap, because you would have knights, nobles, which would be they get their money from the land that they owned, from the rent from all the people who lived on their land and everything, and so like the noblemen and the high class would have the money, but then when they would invent the different more industrializations, poorer people could, and I can't remember what industries he said were doing it at that time, but yeah, poorer people were doing industries and making money, and so then they'd have more money than like a knight, and so then then they would start to get invited to have, like people go to their weddings. I think maybe he even gave an example like queens and kings, or maybe that was in the another video, but stuff like that. Like then they start hosting parties and going to parties, and then there's a disruption. Then there's a lot of people who are confused and upset, and so then you get a sentiment of anything can go, anything goes, and so then people start having different ideas. You weren't allowed to read the Bible until they did the printing press with Gutenberg in like 1448 or something, and then they in the beginning of the 1500s is when printed books started hitting the bookshelves in England and Germany, Martin Luther rewrote the Bible, translating it not from Latin but from Greek and Aramaic, and people and everybody was able to read it and have their own Bible. And they were doing sermons on the streets, and so there was this radical reinterpretation of the Bible, and I think there were lots of even things that a lot of the more conservative modern day Christian sects, like Jehovah's Witnesses maybe and stuff, believe Like when Jesus comes back, the first people to go to heaven will be 100,000 male virgins or something like that. And I think so, a lot of those like things are from some things you are from like the Middle Ages also, not all from biblical times. But anyway, yeah. So people started reinterpreting the Bible, and I guess what happened was they realized it was a big rebellion against the wealth of the church. So they decided that they noticed that Jesus was poor. He dressed in robes and his bare feet and sandals, and let poor people wash his feet and hung out with poor and invited the poor. They paid attention to that part of it. And so they were like, yeah, so what does that have to do with, the wealth of the church? And so that's when they came up with the idea of, protecting the poor and sharing with the poor. And so having communes, like where you share everything. The Christian church, when it started to flourish after the fall of the Roman Empire, it kind of took over from the Roman Empire. This is what Dan Carlin was saying. Because like there was a sudden drop off of the Roman Empire. It wasn't like, it was gradual, but when it finally fell in Britain, it was sudden. Like, you should read, Bede, I think it is, or like there's actually a firsthand account of like a generation after that. You can read on my website. But he took, I guess they had 4 legions. He took the legions back to try to fight the barbarians who were going into Italy, and it wasn't too long until the Germans found out about that, through traders, and they went and invaded Rome, and they easily took over Rome because the Romans weren't fighters. They were Romans. They were civilized, and it was a legion, the professional army that took over that. So they kicked their asses, and it happened within like a generation, just within like a few years. I think he removed the troops in 410 BC. That was the year that Rome was sacked, and just like by 430 or something, it was already in the hands of the Angles and the Saxons. That's where England comes from, the name. It's how did I get on that subject? In the 1500s, there's a lot of other change going on, and anything. They started the poor. Oh yeah, and the Christian church. So in the fall of Rome, when Rome fell, like, it had to keep its the structure stayed in a lot of ways. The Pope stayed, but all of these people's mansions, like in 410, in the very last chapter of Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which is on my website. You can read it. He said how rich Romans were, like in 410, like when they came, and they sacked all of Rome. They emptied out all of the different sepulchers and everything, and destroyed statues. Did the iconoclasm, and which is one of the subjects of the video. And but like Romans were so rich that one family, for example, had like 8 mansions, kind of like Taylor Swift has 8. As I think when she had like 14 mansions, they had a mansion in England, Rome, I guess south of Italy, Egypt, and they would just go all over, senators were paid like the equivalent of like millions of dollars a year, and so it was just great wealth discrepancy. And the people who sacked Rome, the Visigoths, who were running from the Huns, they were. It was like Spartacus. It was an army of Romans as they were coming down in south. They were liberating the slaves, and the slave was part of the army. And so it was like a rebellion of the whole culture, a crumbling of the business plan. And and so so anyway, when they took over at the fall, so that's how rich those guys were. They lived in these huge mansions. In fact, the White House is a perfect example of it. You know, if you wanted to do a wealth like richness, like I can't wait till they make those videos, but realistic, you know, like Ridley Scott's Gladiator from like 1994 or whatever that was. When you see the first shot of it going down the road and the Colosseum in the background, like the Colosseum's way too big, the pillars are way too big, you know. But you could redo Rome realistically, and I'm going to do it. I have it rebuilt on Google Earth, and I can do videos just like that, you know, traveling on ground level. It's fucking amazing. I can't wait till I do it. You can download it right now and play the videos. Yeah. But like, you don't have to exaggerate because it's huge and amazing anyway. Like ancient Rome, straight streets for like 2 kilometers in the middle of the city, all over the place, and but yeah, but like somebody's house would be like the White House. Like that's somebody's house. In fact, when I rebuilt Rome, I rebuilt all of Rome all the way to the building, like I said, and actually many different iterations of it, starting with Romulan Rome. But one of the houses that I drew in, at least one, maybe a few, was the White House, and it was, you know, somebody's house, you know. But it's called neoclassical architecture, but that's how rich they were. So when Rome fell, they would convert these giant mansions into apartment buildings, you know, for poor people. And you know, people even converted the Colosseum into a giant apartment building, and that would have been interesting, beautiful living. But like Saint Augustine was one of these senators. I think he was a senator himself, or his grandfather was, and yeah, the Pope. He was the Pope, and he lived in a mansion, or that was like his grandfather's mansion, and now it was a big, you know, apartment building, you know, with a bunch of people. But at the fall of Rome, they would also turn them into, you know, hospitals, and so the beginning of the invention of the hospital was, it was from the Christians, from when they would period of when they would do the wealth transfer after the, you know, fall of Rome with these rich people and turn their houses into hospitals. But it was a Christian thing, because at the fall of Rome, that was also a little bit before that. It was also coincided with the birth of Christianity, Theodosius. And so I can't remember the details, but yeah, one of those was the first, and I think it was in Turkey. It was the first hospital. But the point is that it was Christian. There was the principles of Christian Christianity that founded it, because the Christianities had the principles of communism, of sharing, of creating resources for the poor. You know, so it was a natural evolution of society. So, you know, in a lot of ways, maybe the fall of Rome was in a way evolving society, in that they shared resources and created hospitals to take care of poor people, like for free. And so that was kind of reborn in the 1530s with Munster, and their idea, they're so fervently of having communism, you know, and like sharing everything, because it was the opposite of what they were living in that day. So they were thinking in terms of that kind of rebellion. They thought it was, and they were called the millennialists because they were 1500 years after, 1533 was exactly 1500 years after the death of Jesus Christ. And so that was like 3 years before the rebellion. So that's when they were all like, they thinking that they were going to have another rebellion. And I heard even 1,000 years after death of Jesus Christ, there were a lot of millennialists who thought that there was going to be a big rebellion and people were acting up. And 533, you know, maybe that had something to do with the fall of Rome as well, and all of because a lot of the barbarians who entered Rome were Christians. The barbarians who sacked Rome in 410, the Ostrogoths, Visigoths, who weren't even in Roman Empire, they were Christians. So Roman Empire was Christian, but also the barbarians on the outside of the Roman Empire were also Christian. And so it was like the Christian religion and culture had kind of grown out, and they probably had, incorporated a lot of their technology and all of their warfare too, and that's why they got their asses kicked. But yeah, so they thought that they were going through another revolution, like so that anything changes, anything can happen, and so mix that with ergot, and people actually believe in communism and all kinds of communism, and so that's why they were so firm at fighting for it. And it's very similar to what's happening today. In terms of time, temporally, in the year 2033, I think that'll be exactly, that's going to be exactly 2,000 years after the death of Jesus Christ. So maybe there's lots of Christian-backed people think that gives them a license to go back to the Christian ways. That's why we have all of this new Christian nationalism. Could have to do with that, thinking that Jesus is going to come back in 2033 because it's 2,000 years after, because that's what they did 500 years ago, and that's what they did 1,000 years ago and 1,500 years ago. And why people think that this is a Christian nation, even though it's the First Amendment. And man, kind of forgot what I was talking about. Oh yeah. So that has a lot to do with now, and so I think that could have why like Trump is trying to reinvent everything. Basically, do stuff that's illegal. Maybe he thinks if he does all this stuff that's illegal, and luckily he's getting sued by the federal judges, but after he gets away with it, then you just change the law, because he's already busted the law a bunch of times. The emoluments clause says you can't make the money off the presidency. He's been doing that. And it says that if you partake in a revolution or in a coup, you can't run again. And he did that and then won. And then all of the other federal cases that that guy Jack, whatever, was giving up against, and they just had to drop him as soon as he became president, because the fact he was president, he had to govern as president now. So now he's a president to avoid being out of jail, and so then he breaks all the laws, and so it creates lots of possibilities. And but yeah, there's lots of other parallels though that I noticed that was happening during that time. Because the world was a lot different then, and when they were living in that tiny little town in the walls, and people were a lot more isolated, not knowing what's going on in the rest of the world. It creates the possibility to create just all sorts of little microcosm worlds that are just wild. And and so then pattern things happen. It's interesting how the whole sexual thing happens. Like the leader, first he's Jesus, and he's like Jesus, and he remembers the Bible and is really smart, but then he has to become the prophet, who's the only one who can talk directly to God, and then after that he has to persecute those who don't agree with him and kill them, and then after that he has to be able to have sex with everybody, because if you share the money and the food, you might as well share the sex, and then after that they all get killed and then prosecuted by the authorities. So then they all have to suicide together, like with Waco, Texas, and then Jamestown. And so how can, even though they aren't communicating with each other, or reading each other's books, they don't think that's what's going to happen. It's not like they're at the beginning they're talking about it. Why does it all happen the same way? And maybe because when you're don't have a wide enough view of the world that's going on, you become selfish and authoritarian, and but once those guys aren't satisfied with that, then they realize that if they lose their power, because one of the questions is Like, at what point do they stop believing in what they're saying, and maybe they start believing what they're saying, or not believing what they're saying, but they have to say it anyway, so that in order to protect themselves. Because if they admit it, they'll be killed. But yeah, in the end, they were all, after they were killed, their bodies were put in these cages as big as phone books, and hung at the top of the church, and they're still there in Munster. The cages are. Yeah, I was thinking, like, that'd be interesting if they just left the bodies in. I should ask what happened to the bodies, because I was wondering how long it would take until all the bodies fall down through the cracks, through the bars, and even the clothing. But yeah, maybe it just got too morbid for people after a while. But yeah, because like in those days, the only way that you could control somebody was through torture, and that's a question, like, why were they the way that they were? And maybe one way that they were into torture was so much was because just killing them wasn't enough, like when the first Christians were persecuted, a lot of them had to be killed and fed to the lions and stuff, because they refused to repent, because they believed in the afterlife. And so for somebody who believes in the afterlife, the way to deter him is by torturing him. And so maybe if you want somebody to, yeah, so, but they would kill people different ways. Poor people had to get drowned or burned at the stake. Like, there was different levels of it. So because if you're a religious protester, that was the worst. So burned at the stake was the worst. And after that, if you're poor, that's drowned. That's like second worst. And they would, like, I guess, use ladders for that, dip the ladder in, then take you out 10 minutes later. But and then but the best way to die was by chopping your head off. That's how they killed. Oh yeah, that's how they killed that 15-year-old girl at the end. And they said that when they chopped her head off, the guy did it so quickly he could have done 3 of the girls. But so that was the most merciful way, and that's why they invented the guillotine, because it was supposed to be even easier to kill, more merciful, because sometimes people didn't do it right the first time. But it kind of, I don't know if it backfired, because then they just killed, like, I think 10,000 people that way in the French Revolution. Yeah, so yeah, so people, I think today probably are a lot less faithful. Like you could deter them from doing stuff. You don't have to torture them, because we have less faith in the afterlife in general. But yeah, we're generally a lot more civilized. Kind of starting to. Maybe I'm getting tired because I'm a little bit baked. But there were what were the other? Iconoclasm. So iconoclasm was the other subject of the video. It's another thing that happens over and over again, and it's like the pendulum. It's the perfect example of, like, rich versus poor, left versus right pendulum, going from one end to the other. So, like, because at the beginning of the civilization, people think it's awesome to, like, they build a lot of statues to the leaders, and they adorn the city with statues and tribute to people, the founders of the city and their generals, and then they make the big structures like the Colosseum. But then on the other end they go, oh no, that's all wealth, and we don't want wealth. We like to take care of the poor people, so we don't want anybody to be rich. So then they tear down all of the statues and stop having shows in the Colosseum. That was a Christian thing, to stop the gladiators. I think the last gladiator fought in like 389 in the Colosseum, and because the Christians said it was too brutal. But then they went too far to the left, because they were like, yeah, so now no competitions either, because that's brutal, and no acting out, no theater, because that's too celebratory of the rich. And so And that's kind of what even modern day communists do. In uh, in Albanian communism, they had laws that said there was only certain types of songs you could play, like with a guitar, and it was really, and in like North Korea, only 20 different haircuts you can have, and because they try to be really sparse, and the and modern day Muslims trying to tear down all of the different statues, even the ones that are like 4,000 years old and 3,000 years old. They're just destroying them because they're trying to fight against the wealthy. And it's too bad. In the Crusades in like the year 1100, they melted a statue that was built of Alexander the Great in like 350 BC. So it was like a 1,400-year-old statue that they melted down for money because they just didn't care about statues and people anymore. And maybe that's why they're finding a lot of statues underground, because when Rome was falling, people were like, hey, let's not let people destroy our nice statues. Let's bury them not right really deep, so that in 2,000 years they'll find them intact and be able to make like museums out of them. So it's like a rebellion against the rich. Like when the Munsterians rebelled against the rich, they killed them all, and that's kind of what some people are saying now. Scott Galloway, I think, said that there's a revolution coming, and like I guess he's a multimillionaire businessman professor in New York, and he's like, there's a revolution of the poor coming, and I guess now today we're having a revolution, a big march. All the federal workers quit work today to march against Donald Trump for allowing six under 26-year-olds, including a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, to hack into the U.S. Treasury for Elon Musk as co-president of Trump. Because temporally, not only in 2033 will be 2,000 years after the death of Christ, and that's even numerically more important than 500 years ago for Munster, because 2,000 years, that's 1,000, not 1,500, but not just that, but like I think in the year, like the same year, it's going to be 250 years since the birth of America. Because 1776 plus 250 is 2000 and like 25. Oh yeah, so like around now or something. And so 250, that's a segment of time. 250, 500,000. The ancient Romans had the idea of the saeculum, which was the lifetime of a human. And when Romulus saw 12 eagles flying through the sky, the prophet said that that meant that Rome would last 1,200 years. And so they supposedly knew that even from the beginning. And they had the saeculum party from Rome, of the 1,000-year saeculum party. And I think Rome did last 1,200 years, 753 AD until minus 1,000 years. So what's 1,000 minus 753? 247. So in the year 247 was a saeculum of 100,000, and they were still going strong. And at 203, 447, that's around the time of the fall of Rome. So it was, as per prophecy, they got it right. But the idea, they've had ideas of generations forever. Strauss and Howe have their book Generations, talking about how a lifetime would be 84 and 80 years, and then they break it up into 4 different generations of 20 years each, and so there's 4 generations happening. And so you would name the generation that you're living now as the generation of the youngest generation, because those are the ones who are getting formed under it, and then they bring their idea through the world until they are influential and have all how the mixture of all the different generations. After they had formulas for it, after 4 generations, the dynasty dies, because the founder is the leader. Second guy is almost as good, but then the third guy, he's kind of like a spoiled brat, and so then they squander it and they lose him. And so, I know a lot about this stuff from my timeline. Like so 250 years is generally like a dynasty. 500 years would be a kingdom. So the kingdom of Rome lasted from 753 to 509. So like 250 years was the kingdom of Rome. 500 years was the Republic of Rome. 500 years was the Empire of Rome. Right, Republic of Rome 509 to 27, Empire of Rome 27 to 476. So it like works out that way, and so that's why people pay attention to that stuff. Like for the Revolution, in the 1533, 1500 years after. Jane Roberts, whose channel is Seth the Alien, says that every 2,000 years there is like a psychic reinvention, and so if there was a big one, with Jesus 2,000 years ago, then we're going through one now, which kind of means that. Like all goes, anything goes, lots of revolutions. So here's the problem. If there's going to be a revolution, it needs to be a revolution that is piloted, that is kind of like oversaw and supervised by the smartest people, by the most well trusted, the most intelligent, because it's kind of like, like what the New Agers say, what Bashar says, we're breaking up or aliens say we're breaking up into different parallel universes, and the longer we wait, the harder it will be to teleport yourself to the other parallel universe. So decide like what side you're on now, and so similarly with politically, like if we let the fascists take over and we don't even think now, then they get their talons into it. Change the law because they get away with breaking law, rewrite the Constitution, and then it's kind of like the fall of Rome. I think Trump took the Constitution off of the White House page already, and I'm like, oh God, I hope they don't take the law code off of the website, because I was copying that onto my site. I want to put it on my site for my QR codes. I want to do QR codes for different laws and sell those on Amazon, but yeah, so if we all kind of like decide that we're going to reinvent the world, but reinvent the world in a really beautiful, like awesome way now, and get real into it and get it, then that could kind of set the seeds for more. So like my idea to reinvent the world is because of technology, we have the ability to use the technology for education, and because people like to say, technology bad, but it's like, yeah, but what about for education, and so we need to create, and we need to make it so that you can educate yourself, because we're having, we could have like an economic crash, and if we all have schools now, we all get used to the schools, and then if there's an economic crash and then there's no more school, people are like, oh, okay, so we're not going to learn anymore, because school is kind of like a place that you go because because they don't think they can trust you to learn on your own, and so if you open up a society that rewards you for learning on your own, then and you make it competitive, and you pay people to live the life, make it professional learner, then everybody's going to want to do it and compete for it. And so my idea is to create a lot of online competitions, like physical and mental, and and make it as institutional as possible. Like make T-shirts that, like NASCAR drivers with all the advertisements on their jackets, do that for yourself with your own wardrobe. Your shirt advertises you in every way. So it has your IQ on your upper right. It has your history IQ on your upper left. It has your how many books you've done, book reviews on your a little bit below. It has like the edge of the personality profile you are on your belly. Your bicycle ride speed for 20 kilometers here. Your 5K running time here, bench press here, and just littered with text, just giving your data, and you have to print yourself a new T-shirt every like 2 months, every 2 weeks, because the ancient Romans would do a physical fitness test every 2 weeks. They would walk 20 miles, 10 miles out and 10 miles back with a 60-pound backpack on their back, and so I'm gonna have like you have like every 2 weeks you take a history test called biweekly history test. Well, and then a random number generator has different ones: AD, BC, ancient history, and future, and 20th century. And so AD would be like 2000, 0 to 2000. So that's 0 to 200s, random number, say 65. So that would be the 650s, and you have a minute to say what happened in the 650s, and then at the end you see how many you get right from comparing it with Wikipedia. And you score yourself, and so the more details you know, the better grade you get, and then you YouTube that, so you would get paid based on how well you do on that, and then you with Strava prove how well you perform on the bicycling, and if you want to do that from weightlifting and other things, because I have it for all the different sports: rowing, fighting, riding, running, swimming, triathlon, and then you do the book reviews and on YouTube and yeah, I already took those biweekly history tests. That's cool. You have an hour to do each, of these random number generators. So you have 60 for an hour. But then the other one would be the test that I have here, the history test for North England, where that's 100 years, and I have 500 years. That goes 500. Across. Oh, that linked it. Here, let's go back. There we are. So if you click on it, it links to one, wherever you clicked on. So then you can use it as a test. But then if you double tap, but you don't hit the link. Oh man, I keep hitting the link. I was able to zoom it out earlier today. Here, link where there's the man. I'm hitting the link. If you hit the part that's not a link, then it goes up. Duh. I forgot. Anyway, so that's the 500 years, it's 100 across. And so if you learn 150 of those, all 150 of those, the top red is war, middle science, bottom culture. Then it's 150. You do that in like an hour, and you you pass that one. Yeah, it works really well on the cell phone and also the computer. It takes up the cell phone perfectly like that, where it takes up the whole phone, like the whole thing like that. And then if you do it like this, it takes it up the whole thing perfectly, and then you can see all the other countries on it. But so then if you can do this country, that's 150, and then you do another country, and then the more countries you do. On my timeline, I have like a 500-year segment for different countries. I have every single country in the world based off the UN, but if you get all the parts of the country and all the parts of history, from 5,000 BC and then all the way up to 52,000 BC, increasing exponentially, that's a lot of different sections, and that's a lot of tests, dude. Like, this is England, then you can do France, Ireland, and so that's a lot of, it kind of solidifies and makes official. You never finish learning, and so there's the challenge to do it, and then also provides the opportunity for lots of different types of people, to study whatever they want. Like the Japanese can do the Japanese one. This is also open source, so if anybody you want to do one, send me the code and I'll put it onto my website, and then I don't have to do it. Because I will never be able to finish this. Even if I were to live to 150 and work 18 hours a day, which there's no way I could do that. I still wouldn't be able to finish it because it's like exponentially big. It's like huge, and so I kind of have these like to fill up all the image for all the side and everything. So. For the ones I have prepared, so it's kind of like, but if you let everybody else do it, they can post it in, and then they can have like their own little random corner of history, and then make a story out of it, like Conan the Barbarian, this happened here, and it went here, right here, But that's the second test, the third test. So book review, random number generator, and the image to link, kind of like cue cards test. And the cool thing about this is it's instantaneous, and once you download it, it's on your phone and fast. And it's easy to get to the other sites. I think it works great on the cell phone and the computer too. So that could be a way to reinvent history in a way that would make us go into the future in a really good trajectory and be ready for anything that happens. For example, if there's an economic crash, you could still have, and then everybody's isolated, everybody could still stay smart. and educated just from simple websites that they have downloaded onto their, like mine, downloaded on their computer, and they don't need internet, and they just study, and then they, you know, and even the technology, and then, or if you know, if we want to fix the economy by giving everybody health care, the way that you give everybody health care is by us not spending so much money on like education, like going to school, having to travel to the bit school, maintain the big building, make everybody take classes they don't want, trying to keep classes full by making people go there they don't want to, and then having to continuous education, like Peter Turchin's book, what's it called, affluent, it's where, you know, people, you know, because there's there's less and less space for people to be rich, there's less and less, but there's, you know, more and more people who are trying to get in there. The one way to do it is by more and more school, and so that's like a scam that happens. More and more school. If you do more, so who can hold out and pay for the most school, then that person would get hired. But yeah, I can't remember the name of his book, but he's talking about how there's always, you know, crashes in society, and one thing that happens is, you know, a lot of rich people, they have lots of kids, you know, like Pete Higgs has 7 kids, Elon Musk, like, what does he have, like 7 kids, because they can afford to have a bunch of kids. Then they have a bunch of kids, and they get divorced and have another wife, a bunch of kids, a divorced wife, bunch of kids. So there's all these kids who grew up rich, and then they have to share the wealth, and then the wealth kind of dries up, and then so there's all these people who, like, they want to be high class and stay high class, and so then we try to use education, you know, like the lady from Full House who tried to get her daughter into school like that. And so it's just like, and it's expensive as hell. So if we just not spend money on that, then you can make it more meritocratical, and have it so just how good your grade is from the test, and do it from your cell phone. You know, and also when you're sitting around on the cell phone, like, you know, I found $16 in my wallet today, in my pocket of these pants. And so that's why I got weed. But I went into the weed, and I was looking at the dude who takes your ID, and he was just flipping through his phone, and I don't know what he was doing, but maybe he was probably like looking at photos. Maybe I did see he was looking at photos. I think I did. He was looking at photos. You know, I was like 10 feet away from him. But that's what most people do. You know, little kids, you know, the people complain about how people are on their computers all the time and inside all the time and not in nature and stuff. Well, it's kind of just the same way that eating all the time and snacking all the time can be a way to replace your finger fixation from smoking, because you're trying to quit smoking. Well, a way to alleviate your finger fixation all the time with your cell phone, like scrolling through Instagram all the time or playing video games or whatever, could be playing this. If you get addicted to learning, you know, like I'm addicted to it. If I was to sit and have to wait around, I wouldn't mind it, because I would have this thing, and I'd be like, all right, let's see if now's my time to see if I can pass it. Because once I pass it, then I'm going to YouTube it, myself passing it. And after I YouTube myself passing it, that's like me kicking ass on YouTube, you know, and entertaining people with how amazing I am, like a party trick, you know. Look at my party trick. Look at how I can memorize all of it. And then you can learn as you see me talking, because just the same way as my biweekly history test works, you know, like the random number generator, you have a minute to talk about whatever happened. The more you say, the more points you get, you know, like it's like if you were to talk as fast as you could say enough things to get about 1,600 things said in an hour. So it's kind of aligns with the perfect SAT score, because I wanted to have my random number generator replace the SAT score and have the scores the same. So because you can only speak so fast. So same thing with this, like, if you have to get done with 150 of these in an hour, that's like 20 seconds or something per hour, 25 seconds per minute. So to guess one of these, so if you know it, then that gives you 25 more seconds to try to elaborate before you click the link, because, you know, like one of these, like the Napoleonic Wars. Well, when you click on the timeline, there's lots of detail that you could say, and so you could, you know, or back up with Wikipedia. So, you know, if you're there for 25 minutes rattling on about it, not just that, you know, maybe you could have not just that you passed it, but you passed it and this is what my score was. Like, this is how many things I said about those things. And then it kind of turns into it's kind of like learning, you know, a vocabulary, you know, because once you get it right, and then from doing the pre-test, and then you get it right from passing the test and doing well,
then you've learned it, like me, I'm fluent in Spanish. And the reason why I'm fluent in Spanish is because I spent all this time, like as I was taking buses and riding my bike around South America, I was just studying vocabulary lists, and then I learned Spanish. And so like once you learn a word, you learn it forever, like dog is perro, like that chair over there is called silla. Like I know everything in Spanish because I learned it once. So that could be how it is with history. Once you pass, it's like a vocabulary list. Once you learn it, and imagine if you know England and France and all the countries in Europe from 1500 to 2000, and all the countries in the world, and then all the countries in the world from 0 to 2000. You have like all of history memorized. That means you have. Then the sum is going to be greater than the whole is going to be greater than the sum of its parts. You're gonna be like have omniscience. That's what I mean by omniscience. You're gonna have like the wider view. Like you could have you could have RAM drive like a computer. Like as you're looking at a generation happening in like the fall of Rome, because you have such an understanding of history, you're also simultaneously going to be looking at the generation at the Enlightenment, and you're going to be seeing how the rich lose power, and then the poor gain power, and it becomes communistic. Like at the same time, analyzing both, and then you're going to bringing in the one in the middle. Oh, this and that's how it has to do with the future, and so this is what happens. Then 30 years later, you have Jan Hus, and then Jan Hus's correspondent, and so you can have all the correspondence in the future, like just boom off the front of your head, just the way that like you know history, backwards and forwards, like your kid. You know what your kid just instinctually would do in any situation because same thing with history. You know what would happen. What happened in history because of all of history, instinctually, and that way the future, and that way you'd be a really good legislator for society because you know the goods and bads, and that because Trump's really bad at history, like I don't think it's any coincidence that he's so bad at history that he thinks that Colorado borders with Mexico, that we had airports when we were having the Revolutionary War, and like all that other crazy stuff that he said, that relates to him, saying that he's the most persecuted person of all time, and but he'll be the greatest president of all time, and it'll be the golden age of America, and him giving the keys to the treasury to Elon Musk and his 20-year-old lackeys is this greatest thing ever because disrupting and taking over Panama and Greenland and Canada and getting rid of the Department of Education, the CIA, and the FBI and turning Gaza Strip into beachfront property for America and Israel is like the greatest idea ever because they've never done it before. And if they've never done it before, it's because they were dumbasses. And so it sounds exactly because he's not a historian. He doesn't know that because nobody's a historian. They don't know that sounds exactly like Caligula wanting to change the statue of like Solomon or one of the prophets in Jerusalem into him. And that's one of the reasons why he got assassinated and like trying, and like Romulus, Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, like from the movie Gladiator, he wanted to change the name of Rome to Commodius, and he thought he was the greatest at everything. So then, just like the Kim Jong-un is the greatest golfer in the world, like perfect golfing and perfect bowling, like Commodus was the perfect gladiator, and so he would drug all of his like opponents, and he won like 150 gladiator contests, but they would be with like poisoned arrows and with pre-injured fighters, and like Trump, he was just the greatest at everything, because he's really big brain, smartest at everything. Elon Musk, smartest at everything, and then, so now if you're rich, smartest at everything, money's all of it, God money, richer you are, smarter you are, and then that would mean suck up all the oxygen, all the money. Then if you're poor, you're dumb, and everybody's dumb. Like the fall of Rome, all of the writers of Rome were in the Republic of Rome. Livy, Pliny, or the very beginning of the empire. The very last real good writer was Seneca, and that was the tutor of Nero, and he was forced to kill himself. And then that was it. If you couldn't write, you couldn't, because there was suppression against it. Elon Musk bans people from Twitter, and so there's lots of parallels. And so I think that kind of means that people should kind of support people and be really vigilant as to try to make the world a better place by picking sides, and making sure you're on the right side. And realizing that learning and information and giving points for knowing things and that stuff in the past is what we should do, and support people. And so I think people should get paid to know history, and so that's why I'm going to set up my system and pass my test pretty soon. And so that is what I thought, and the insights that I had about the Munster Rebellion and all the similarities. Donald Trump is Jan. Was that his name? Jan Hus? I don't think it was Jan something else. And John of Leiden. Because as everybody was tripping on ergot, well, now everybody's tripping on weed, because we legalized weed a few years back, 10 years ago, and people are still kind of getting used to smoking, and kind of like, yeah, maybe and then the magic mushrooms, they're legalizing it, and we're getting into that. Maybe people are doing that too much, and so yeah, everybody's reinventing. Let's reinvent everything. And maybe it's because we're at the center of the galaxy, where the gravitational field from the splitting of the explosion and the splitting of the black hole in the center of the galaxy is going on when we cross the plane. I don't know. That creates a possibility for lots of different parallel universes, and so we're now where we can all create those parallel universes. So decide which one you're going to. So that's what I think about the Munster Rebellion. Thanks for the request, C55365. And if you have any other really good requests like that, dude, introspective, really crazy parts of history or whatever, then give them to me, because I'm into, some people say all that a man is his name. I'm trying to fortify my name right now. So maybe if I do a lot of really good videos on YouTube, I could get hired. I'm applying for a job at Avid for Adventure, dude. Maybe they're going to hire me, and I can be a professional mountain bike guy. That'd be badass. And ride my mountain bike around professionally. I have to get the wheel fixed first. It doesn't have a bottom bracket on it, and ride and stuff. But anyways, talk to you tomorrow.